It was a crime that shocked the world. In August 2017, award-winning investigative journalist Kim Wall disappeared into the ocean on a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to interview Danish inventor Peter Madsen in his self-built submarine. She was never seen alive again. When the authorities began trying to piece together her last known movements, Peter Madsen offered wild explanations as to what happened to the much-loved 30-year-old. 11 days later, body parts began washing ashore, leaving investigators with the seemingly impossible task of figuring out the truth and unraveling the story of how Kim had unknowingly been trapped with a monster. Kim Isabel Fredrika Wall grew up in a small town in southern Sweden. She knew from a young age that she would one day be a journalist, as both her parents were journalists themselves. She spent her early years trotting across the globe to exotic locations across Europe and across the Atlantic to Mexico. Those who knew Kim described her as passionate and caring. She stood up for what was right and learned the power of her voice from a young age when she and her friends protested against a neighborhood tree being chopped down. In the end, their efforts were a success, and the tree was left alone. This likely had a lasting impact on Kim. After studying international relations at the London School of Economics, Kim began working as a freelance journalist. She went on to receive her master's degree in journalism. Kim's work took her to multiple countries like Uganda and Haiti. She even spent some time in North Korea. Her work was featured in countless news sites, including The Guardian, The New York Times, and The Atlantic. In March 2017, Kim set her eyes on covering the Danish space race. She had been living in Copenhagen with her boyfriend Ole at the time when she came across a sign that read, "Rocket Madsen Space Lab." It was this sign that first sparked Kim's interest in the supposed space race. To simplify things, Copenhagen Suborbitals was founded in 2008 by inventor Peter Madsen and architect Christian von Bengtsen. They created an entirely crowd-funded space program with the goal of launching home-built rockets into space and one day having a Copenhagen suborbital member safely reach the stars themselves. In 2014, there was a split between the men, and Peter created Rocket Madsen Space Laboratory, where he followed a similar crowd-funded space program as Copenhagen Suborbitals. Peter Madsen, or Rocket Madsen as he was known to friends, was born on January 12, 1971. He dabbled in many things and fancied himself a self-taught engineer, amateur aerospace engineer, and engineer. Peter was an eccentric man who had grand plans, many of which he had already achieved. His prized possession was his self-built 58-foot submarine that he revealed in May 2008. Some believed it was even the largest DIY submarine ever made. He named it UC-3 Nautilus. Peter's wild ambitions had turned him into somewhat of a celebrity in Denmark, but behind the scenes, some of those who worked with Peter found him difficult to work with and at times childish. When things didn't go his way or he was upset, Peter would resort to throwing items around the workshop. While that may sound fairly innocent, those items sometimes included things like hammers. By August 2017, Kim had completed half of her story on the Danish space race after interviewing someone from Copenhagen Suborbitals. She just needed to speak with Peter, but needed to do so soon, as the day for her big move to Beijing with Ole was fast approaching. Kim was thrilled when Peter finally got back to her and agreed to meet with tea. She spent 30-odd minutes talking to him about his projects at Rocket Madsen Space Laboratory before Peter offered to take Kim for a ride on Nautilus. As Kim was leaving for Beijing the next day, it was going to be hard to fit the trip in. She already had plans that evening with a pre-planned going-away party with her friends and family. Kim called Ole to discuss it before she decided to take this opportunity and agreed to take a ride on Nautilus with Peter. This way, Kim would be able to finish her story while also experiencing something few others have ever had the chance to do. For a moment, this whole story may have ended differently. You see, Ole was possibly going to go on the sub with Kim, but they both decided it would be rude if neither of them attended their own party. While it is impossible to say there wouldn't have been another casualty that day, it's hard not to think of the what-ifs. Kim kissed Ole goodbye and departed from the dock in the submarine. Shortly after 7 p.m., she sent him a picture of her at the steering wheel. Kim had a big smile on her face and seemed to be enjoying her time so far. Peter Madsen was visible in the background with his back turned towards the camera. As Kim rowed out into deeper waters, she stood in the submarine's tower and waved to shore, knowing exactly where her friends and family had gathered. This was the last time Kim Wall would see the night sky. Not long after this, the hatch was closed and the submarine began to descend into the depths. Once she was under the water, Kim sent Ole one final message. "I'm still alive, by the way, but I'm going down now. I love you." Ole did his best to make up for Kim's absence, all while wondering how she was getting on. The plan had been for Kim to catch the end of the party to say her final goodbyes, but when that time came and went, Ole began to worry. She had now been gone for a few hours, and his repeated messages were going unanswered. As the party wrapped up, Ole headed down to the pier to look for Kim or the submarine. Neither of them were there. Ole then decided to head home and wait for Kim's call. By midnight, she was still not back. Not comfortable to just wait it out, Ole jumped on his bike and began riding around town looking for his girlfriend. He began thinking the worst. At 2 a.m. the next morning, Ole contacted the authorities and reported Kim as missing. Immediately, this was taken very seriously, and a search was launched for Kim, Peter, and the submarine. Boats and helicopters were called in to aid in the search. The first sighting came at 11 a.m. when a boat spotted UC-3 Nautilus near a lighthouse in Kogi Bay. The man in the boat was sure he saw Peter in the tower before the submarine, then disappeared below the surface moments later. As the submarine went down, Peter popped out and began swimming to the nearest boat. He was pulled aboard and taken to the pier, where reporters had already begun to gather. They asked Peter if he was okay, to which he gave them a thumbs up. When pressed further, Peter said he was fine but upset that the submarine had sunk due to a defective ballast tank. Since he was the last person to be seen with Kim, Peter was taken in for questioning right away. When asked about Kim, Peter Madsen told the authorities that he dropped her off on the island's north side at around 10:30 p.m. He claimed this was the last time he had seen her. This was soon proven false by CCTV footage from the area. Not long after, Peter Madsen was arrested and charged with involuntary manslaughter, as the authorities firmly believed some sort of foul play was involved in Kim's disappearance. On the next day, August 12th, Peter attended a pre-trial hearing. Suddenly, his story changed. Peter now claimed Kim died on the submarine, but it was all a tragic accident. Kim had allegedly followed Peter through the 150-pound latch before it fell onto her, hitting her in the head. "It was a terrible accident, a disaster," he said. "No doctor could have done anything. Kim was severely injured. There was a pool of blood where she landed. I touched her neck, but there was no pulse. So, if this was the case, where was Kim? Was she still on the submarine when it sank? No, it wasn't." Peter said he gave Kim a burial at sea by dumping her into the waters 30 miles south of Copenhagen. Finally, Peter said the accident left him feeling suicidal, and he had planned to stay on the sinking submarine but changed his mind at the last minute. Now, the investigators were tasked with finding out the truth. They didn't believe Peter's new version of events, but how would they prove what really happened to Kim? Step 1 was recovering Nautilus. When the submarine was pulled to the surface, preliminary examinations revealed it had been deliberately sunk. Nothing was wrong with the ballast tank. Instead, the hatch had been left open. This meant that the crime scene had been greatly disturbed by the ocean water. It seemed they would need to find Kim's body to get a better picture of the events that unfolded. On August 21st, a cyclist stumbled across a horrific discovery. A headless, limbless torso had washed ashore on the beach near to where Nautilus was sunk. DNA testing confirmed everyone's worst suspicions. The body belonged to Kim Wall. Post-mortem examination of the torso revealed Kim had suffered multiple stab wounds to her groin area. After this report, the charges against Peter Madsen were changed from involuntary manslaughter to manslaughter. As the investigators continued to gather evidence, they discovered disturbing imagery on Peter's computer that gave them a glimpse into his dark mind. It was filled with images and videos of women being tortured. Some of the videos even appeared to be snuff films, meaning they showed real murders. On October 6th, recovery divers found Kim's head, clothing, and a knife in plastic bags in the waters where her torso had washed ashore. In separate searches, her legs were also found. While Kim's exact cause of death could not be determined, her head showed no signs of blunt force trauma, effectively proving that Peter's claims of Kim's accidental death were completely untrue. Instead, the investigators believe this had been a sexually motivated murder that Peter planned beforehand. On October 30th, Peter changed his story yet again. He now said she had died from carbon monoxide poisoning while he was out on the submarine's deck. As to why he dismembered her body, Peter said repeated attempts to get Kim's body out of the submarine proved unsuccessful, so he dismembered her. His trial began on March 8, 2018. Despite Peter maintaining a not guilty plea, he was found guilty of murder, indecent handling of a corpse, and sexual assault on April 25th, and handed a life sentence. Peter Madsen's time behind bars has been as miserable as one would hope. He was assaulted by a fellow inmate in August 2018, which required a hospital stay. However, in October 2020, Peter successfully escaped. Thankfully, he didn't get far, though. In typical Peter Madsen fashion, he made things difficult for the authorities by strapping a fake bomb to himself and threatening to detonate it. After some time, bomb experts figured it was not real, and he was taken back into custody. What happened to Kim Wall is something straight out of a nightmare. You can only imagine the horror she felt in her last moments. Psychiatric evaluations of Peter Madsen in the months leading up to his trial revealed he is a narcissistic psychopath who feels no empathy for others. It seemed it was a matter of time before he followed his darkest urges, but Kim just so happened to be the one who fell into his lap. Thank you for watching another Conviction Crime YouTube video. Please do not hesitate to show your support, should you wish to see more videos in the future.